Hello dear chess friends, I'm International Master Andrey Ostovskiy and you're welcome to the sixth lesson of the series dedicated to defense and counterattack in chess. In this lesson we make a transition to the methods of more active defense. This first position is taken from the game Topalov and Gelfand. We can see that White sacrificed a minor piece for 2 pawns and attack, because as you can see, pawns e5, f4, g3, and h2 create a very nasty pawn chain. So this pawn chain seriously limits Black's activity, making the knight h7 very poor. Moreover, White has a concrete threat, so Queen is about to occupy d3, creating a so-called tandem with the bishop. And there will be a concrete threat of a checkmate, because if knight goes to f8, let's say, then bishop a3 simply captures that knight and queen h7 is coming. So queen d3 is very nasty threat, and at first glance it's not so easy to find a good defense for Black. But in such a situation, when you already have a material advantage, Black has an extra minor piece in this situation. In addition to all methods that we discussed in previous lessons, you have an additional one. It is to sacrifice your extra material back. And Gelfand actually did exactly this. So he took on e5, controlling d3 square. Pawn took on e5 and rook took on e5. So now in the material sense, position is balanced completely, but we can see a big difference if compared to the initial situation. So now Black no longer has problems with the knight h7, because now this knight achieves some perspective squares to occupy. They are g5 and f6. From g5, this knight will create a threat of getting to h3 with the checkmate. By the way, bishop b7 after this sacrifice became extremely active and dangerous for White. From f6, this knight will try to occupy, let's say, e4 square, good central point, where the knight will be very active and dangerous to White. At the same time, there will be an idea of putting the knight at g4 with the further jump to e3, another great strong point. So there are a lot of holes in White's position. Actually, pawn structure is just awful. Almost all the pawns starting from a2, c4, c3, and finishing with the e2 are very, very weak. So they are potential objects of attack for Black's pieces. So in such a situation, a pair of bishops means nothing, actually, because Black has all the resources to prevent White's activity. So queen d3 is no longer a problem. In such a situation, Black has a chance to play bishop to e4, easily closing diagonal. And now, let's say after queen d4, Black has a resource of, let's say, queen to e8, protecting everything. So the rook, the bishop, and after exchanging light squared bishops, well, Black won't have a single problem. So in a game, White decided to take this knight because it was potentially very annoying. So White was trying to simplify a position to achieve this typical pattern with opposite colored bishops. But the problem with that, there are still a lot of other pieces on the board, so drawish trends are very, very low. In fact, taken into account very exposed position of White's king, right? And the bishop b7 that controls this extremely important diagonal, and simply serious weakness of light square complex in general, Black easily have a lot of attacking possibilities, and that is exactly what happened in the game. So Black gradually started an attack against the king. Pay attention to bishop a3, it occupies a strange position, attacking really nothing. So another problem here, it is almost not possible to activate it. It takes time, and White simply has no this time, because Black already starts activating his pieces. So everything says Black is just much better. c5, queen e8, attacking e2, and preparing the activation through light squares. Queen d3, bishop e4. Queen goes to d2 now. Queen goes to e6 with the idea of queen h3. Rook f2, pawn takes c5, rook f1, rook e8. And after c4 and queen h3, Black gradually started the attack. Rook to g5, then to g4, something like h5, h4. Kind of very easy play to break through on the king side. So Black was successful and won the game. So the advice in such a situation, when you have a material advantage but you experience some problems with protecting your king or any other kind of problems, so don't be greedy, okay? It's much better just to have a balanced position in which you have no problems with the defense than to struggle finding only moves to save your king or just to protect your position. So just sacrifice the material back. It is a typical method to reduce the pressure. Let's have a look on the other example. This position arose in the game Philip Korchnoi. We can see that black has an extra pawn, but position is simply awful because all the pieces are very passive. Pay attention also to the activity of white's pieces. All the pieces are in the play. There is a great chance to attack on the king side because black's pawn structure is compromised there. White has advantage in space. Pawn d5 is very weak, so it is hanging, and white has a chance to take it at any moment. But probably the most annoying threat is something like rook to e1 followed by e6, and then at some point white will continue with a direct attack against weakened g6 h7 pair. So the sacrifice on g6 is in the air in this case, and black simply struggles to find a good way to protect his king. Everything is very bad, very passive, and very annoying. So what to do in such a situation? In the previous example, we saw that, well, if you have extra material, sometimes you have a chance just to sacrifice it back and everything will be fine. So here it is not that simple to do. So it's very hard actually to imagine the way to sacrifice the material back because black simply has problems of another kind. So in such a situation, you have to search for active possibilities to break the trend, to change the situation, and to try to force your opponent solving problems of a different kind. And black found this interesting possibility. So black took on e5 with the bishop. Extremely brave decision, and at first glance looks like white has so many different ways to win the game. For instance, knight takes d5 looks very natural, just created a lot of threats, including knight b6, knight f6, and so on. But black has queen takes d5. And it is not really a sacrifice, because after rook d5 and rook d5, we can see that for a sacrifice queen, black already has the rook and the minor piece. But white's problem is that bishop on b5 is hanging, and at the same time, black has a threat of taking on h2 with check and taking on g5. So in the best case, white will end up in the endgame with opposite colored bishops and 2 pawns less. So it is a very bad result for white. So after bishop e5, another natural idea for white is to take on c6. Also looks just fine, attacking the queen and attacking the bishop. And black has an intermediate capture on f4. That is the point of black's operation. So for instance, if queen takes on f4, it is not the best move. Then queen takes on c6, controlling f6 square, so there is no checkmate immediately. After, let's say, rook to c1, again, it's not that easy to find a good spot, but queen d6 is enough. So queen just still controls f6 square at the same time. As we can see, the trade of queens is offered. Of course, it favors black if it happens. And if queen goes away, let's say here, creating sort of a checkmate on g7, black has a defense f6. So black is just in time to protect everything, and black has 2 extra pawns. But after bishop f4, white has a nice trick. So queen goes to f6. Again, intermediate move, creating sort of a checkmate on g7, and queen is hanging at the moment. So looks white simply wins. But that was actually black's idea. So black sacrifices a queen and takes on h6. After bishop d7 and rook takes d7, black has only pair of bishops to compensate the queen. Well, of course, 2 pawns, but pawns mean nothing here at the moment, except for probably pawn d5, because pawn d5 is a passed pawn, and being supported by rooks and bishops, this pawn can go quite quickly to the promotion square. To be honest, white still has an advantage, of course, so material advantage, queen is a very strong piece, but the type of the play and the type of the position dramatically changed. So now, instead of having an obvious attack, white has no attack at all. because black has enough resources to protect the king. In fact, white has to do everything to prevent black's really obvious play connected with d4, d3, d2, and so on. And also, pair of black's bishops is a great tactical resource because these bishops are quite mobile. They can create a lot of different threats, so white has to be extremely careful. So according to analysis, if white plays the best way, he still secures advantage. It is not that high. It is, of course, not decisive one, but still an advantage. But it is a great psychological trick to change the position this way, because now white starts struggling. So only a few moves ago, it was a position with the attack. So white solved the problems, kind of which move will be the best to smash black or something like that. And now one of a sudden, white has to solve the problem of another kind, how to stop this pawn on d5. It looks very dangerous, this pair of bishops. There are lots of threats from black's side and so on. So this is really annoying usually, and from practical point of view, black made the best decision possible. So black changed the situation quickly and dramatically, so it became quite a different position. So after rook e1, rook goes to d8, right? So black starts activating his pieces. h5, absolutely unnecessary move. We can see that white is still in the attack, however position changed, so now position demands completely different activities. So this h5 gives white nothing, because even after, let's say, opening the h file, black has no problems with protecting the king, so bishop will simply get to g7 at some point and everything's fine. So black simply starts playing d4, h takes g6, h takes g6, rook d3, and now bishop to a6. And now black has a sufficient counterplay, black is definitely fine, so pawn moves further and further, bishop is here to occupy g7 square in case of rook h3, and white continued playing not that great, in fact, and Korchnoi even managed to win the game. That's the point, the psychological trick. And again, we see this pattern of sacrificing material. So to surprise your opponent, to change the character of the position, to change the type of play, sometimes you have to sacrifice a lot. So, of course, this example is the extreme case. So here, black sacrificed the queen for only 2 minor pieces. Generally, there are a lot of different cases, and there are usually a lot of possibilities to sacrifice not so much. But still, even in this situation, black was absolutely correct from a practical point of view. Let's have a look on the other example. This one is taken from the game Miladinovich Slide Home. So here we can see black has 2 extra pawns, but white has serious initiative along the b file. Just for example, if black plays b5 here, trying to protect the pawn, then rook a2 wins. After queen b6, queen to a1, attacking a6, and black simply has no suitable defense. Let's say after king b7, white has very nice sacrifice. Rook takes a6, queen takes a6, and rook takes b5. So now if king goes to a7, then rook to a5, and after queen a5, king goes to the b file, and then queen b5 check and takes the rook on the 8. If, let's say, queen takes b5 instead, then knight takes b5, attacking the rook c7, at the same time creating a threat of queen a7. But what is more importantly, at any moment, white has this fork on d6, again, within the material. So probably one of the ways to keep the position was king to d7 on the first move, so it works, just trying to improve the position of the king somehow. Then rook takes b7, queen takes c3, queen goes to d1, tricky move, protecting the knight and preparing queen to a4. And here, with the concrete play, black manages to keep a position. So rook takes b7, then bishop c7, queen a4 check, king goes to c8, rook a7 looks risky, but here black has queen c1 and perpetual. So this was the way to keep the position. But maybe black has something more in the initial situation. So in fact, black has 2 extra pawns, so it's very hard to believe that, well, white is the strongest side here. And black found a great way to try to win. So he played rook to e7. This allows white to win the queen after knight b5. So pawn takes b5, rook goes to a2, And now if queen b6, then rook takes b5, of course, attacking the queen. And if queen c6, then rook b6, and then check, and rook goes to d6, winning the game. So instead of that, black prepared rook takes c3. Again, sacrifice of a queen. This changes the situation completely, because after rook takes a5, bishop takes a5, rook takes c3, and bishop takes c3, okay, white has an extra queen, but no attack at all. So a few moves ago, white was in an attack. Now it is a position in which black is not at risk, actually. Black is the only side trying to win in this position because queen is alone. Black has no serious weaknesses, and black has two passed pawns. So white's only option is to try to find a perpetual check. But once again, maybe white has it, maybe not. The point here is that psychologically, it is very hard to change your mind and to start playing for a draw, because white was trying to win. White was trying to attack to checkmate opponent's king. After only a few moves, white is the side which has to protect his position. It is very hard psychologically, and no surprises that black managed to win the game. It is a very interesting method of defense. So just to change the situation dramatically with the help of the sacrifice of some material. In some cases, it is very easy to do when you already have an extra material and you have a chance to sacrifice it back. In some situations, you have to be creative enough to find the way to do that. But anyway, remember this method exists and in many cases helps a lot. Thanks for your attention. See you next lessons.